everyone. Welcome back to Music Impossible. We're on to our next lesson here in our beginning music theory class for middle school to adults. And we're going to start diving into the world of scales. And today we're going to look at the C major and A minor scales and talk about those two and what they look like on the piano keyboard and on the music staff. So let's go over here. Let's take a look at our keyboard here. And one of the things we're going to look at with our keyboard is just identifying those notes that are on the C major scale. So if I were to go here, we got to remember that C is always right next to these two black keys. To the left of the two black keys, it's always going to be a C. So two black keys here, this is going to also be a C. Remember that the C is going to be there every single time, just like any other note on the keyboard is always in the same place. We can sort of use these black key patterns to help us figure this out. So a C major scale is going to be every letter of the musical alphabet. By the way, every single scale we learn is going to have at least every letter of the musical alphabet represented in that scale. And then it'll repeat eventually. And the scales we're going to learn about, the major and minor scales, each have 7 different notes before it repeats. So in this case, the C major scale is all of the white keys on the piano, starting with C and ending on C. And a couple of terms to think about when we think about scales, when they go up the keyboard, we call that an ascending scale, an ascending. And so as we go up, we are ascending. So up is this direction. That would be ascending. And we'll look at what ascending means on the music staff in a second. And when we go down the scale, that has its own word, and that's going to be a descending scale, a descending scale. So ascending is going up and descending is going back down. The word scale, by the way, comes from a Latin word. The Latin word is scala, scala, S-C-A-L-A, and it means ladder. And just like a ladder has one rung at a time, it goes up one step at a time, so do our scales. Scales go up one step at a time. Notice there are no skipped white keys along the way, and it is one note after another without any leaps. You might remember we talked about steps and leaps. This is all stepwise motion, whether we are ascending or descending. Now, if we take our keyboard and we're going to look at an A minor scale, an A minor scale, like the C major scale starts on a C, the A minor scale starts on, you guessed it, an A. And we're going to represent minor with lowercase letters here, A, B, C, D, E, E, F, and G, before it finally repeats at A. Same thing. C major starts on a C, ends in a C. It's all the white keys. A minor starts on A and ends on A. We call these two scales, the C major and A minor, these are relative scales. They're related because they have the same key signature. We haven't talked a lot about key signature, but they both have no sharps and no flats. So we would say the relative major to A minor is C major. Or we could say it the other way around, the relative minor to C major, right? If we have the relative minor to C major, we would call that A minor. And they are related because they share the same key signature. In this case, no sharps and no flats. As we continue in our series of lessons, we'll learn more scales and we'll start introducing sharps and flats into these scales. And we'll learn that every key signature, whether it's 1 sharp or 6 flats, they all have related major and minor keys and scales that go along with those. Now, let's take a look at the same thing as it relates to notes on the music staff. And if we were to take a look at a C major scale, now we're in bass clef here, and we might remember that the second space is a C. All cows eat gummy bears are the spaces on the bass clef. And so we start with a C, and just like on our piano keyboard, we're going to go up one note at a time. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. And there's middle C there at this top note. And this is the ascending C major scale in bass clef. We could do the same thing down here for its relative minor, A minor, and this time we'll start on, let's start on the A that is down here. All cows eat gummy bears, so all, the bottom space is an A. And then we're going to go up the A minor scale, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then finally ending on A. And so that would be the ascending A minor scale. Now, as we'll learn down the road, each one of these notes in the major and minor scale, respectively, have their own names. Each note has a special name. We're going to start by learning just one of those names, and that name is tonic. So the home note, or the bass note, or we call it the first note of every scale, is called the tonic. And that home note also repeats, like we mentioned before. There's lots of C's on the piano keyboard. There's lots of C's on the music staff. Every time in a C major scale, when we get to C, we call that the tonic. The easiest way to remember that is if it's C major, the tonic is C. By the way, if it's G major, the tonic would be G. You got it. So the relative minor to C major, as we learned, is A minor. So the tonic here is A, because it is the home note, or that bass note in A minor is A. Therefore, the tonic, every time the A appears in the A minor scale, or A minor key for that matter, would be considered the tonic note of the scale. And then just to quickly demonstrate, we have our C major scale descending, right? The descending C major scale is going to start on the higher C. So we have that higher C, that middle C, again, still called the tonic because it is the home note. It is C and C major. Now we're going to have the descending C major scale. So as we come back down the keyboard, we're going to have B, A, G, F, E, D, and then finally back to the tonic again. That's C below middle C, and that is also called the tonic. We'll demonstrate the same thing in minor. We'll have the A minor descending scale, A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. And then that first and last note, once again, that A there at the top and the A here at the bottom would be called the tonic. So that's the major and minor scale, just an introduction. As we go down the road, there's formulas to help you figure out major scales. I'm going to give you any starting note, and you'll be able to figure out that major scale with a formula, kind of like you would use in geometry or algebra. And you can plug that in, and you can build any major or minor scale knowing those formulas. All right, you have a little bit of busy work here to do with this. Print out some blank copies of your manuscript paper, of your staff paper, and go ahead and handwrite some of these. We're going to ask you for ascending scales and descending scales, starting on the two we learned today, C major and A minor. You're going to have to identify the scales that are written out for you. So it's a little bit of practice doing these scales and understanding the terms of ascending, descending. What does scale mean? What does it come from? And that you'll see on your homework today. Good luck with that, and we'll see you next time.